afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone has a good lunch, good meal, and you have the energy to listen, to converse, to have a dialogue with us. Welcome to the panel on Decarbonizing ADB. This is a civil society panel organized by the NGO Forum on the ADB, which is a coalition, a global coalition of NGOs, primarily in the South, working on monitoring the international financial institutions, particularly the Asian Development Bank. Now, this session on Decarbonizing ADB would like to look into the operations of the Asian Development Bank in terms of its energy portfolio and how the bank can truly become a bank which will create resilience in communities and in Asia, climate resilience in Asia, by ensuring that communities are resilient in terms of climate change excesses, and this means mitigation and adaptation. The ADB Road 2030, which is the roadmap to Strategy 2030, states this, that Asia is envisioned to be inclusive and resilient. So for this afternoon, we have invited six panelists to have an open discourse and to have exchanges. So let me present to you the first. The first panelist is the technical advisor for energy under the Energy SG Sector Advisory Service Cluster, Mr. Yongping Zai. Mr. Zai, you're given 7 minutes.
Thank you. Let me start with a little bit my own background. I'm Yongping Zai, technical advisor for energy at Asian Development Bank. I appreciate very much this chance to join this panel, and also appreciate and looking forward to listen more your views from stakeholders on such an important topic, the decarbonization. It's a global issue, but it's very much also an ADB issue. We're really ready to hear more from you. It's energy related largely, but also the other sectors concerned like transport, water, urban agriculture, etc. should also be joining this path of low carbon development. Since I'm an energy person, sometimes people call me Mr. Energy for ADB. So let me focus on the energy issue here today. I've spent a little bit more of my own background. I spent last 24 years in working in NDB, first in African Development Bank for 7 years, and now for last 17 years I've been working in Manila, based in Manila in Asian Development Bank, so all in energy sector. So this personal experience in developing countries, Africa and Asia, made me fully aware and understand the issues and challenges in developing countries. So what are the energy challenges in developing world in Asia? For me, there are two important points I want to highlight. First, a challenge of providing modern energy to meet the basic needs of people, lighting, cooking, and heating. So these are the vital basic needs for people, and Asia is still quite far away from reaching the desired level of energy access. More than 400 million people without access to electricity, and more than 1 billion people without clean energy for cooking. So this is the first energy transition we talk in Asia, a transition from a very traditional biomass fuel to modern fuels to meet the basic need for energy access. So this is number one challenge. And the second challenge we're all aware, and this is related to climate change. Energy transition from high carbon energy, intensive energy mix to a low carbon energy mix. And this is also vital for the world because it's about climate for the future of the world and future of our generation. The international community has reached 2 agreements regarding these 2 issues I just mentioned. The Sustainable Energy Sustainable Development Goal, SDG, is about universal access as far as energy is concerned. By 2030, the target is to reach 100% of clean energy access to all people in the world by 2030. And the second agreement, Paris Agreement for climate mitigation and adaptation. So given these challenges and international consensus, ADB's role is to support our developing countries in meeting this energy access goal and also their NDCs for greenhouse gas reduction goal. I think Asia should reach energy access goal much earlier than 2030. That's a worldwide goal. Asia should lead this process. ADB really want to see our countries having 100% of access by 2025, much earlier than 2030, the global goal. And Asia should do much more in GHG reduction. Otherwise, without Asia's contribution, the goal of Paris Agreement will not be achieved, cannot be met. It's so important for Asia to be on board. So now the next question is, we have two challenges, two international agreements, whether these two goals are consistent with each other, can we meet both goals? On the surface, if you talk about the SDG for universal access, theoretically, on the surface, people will say you use whatever modern energy to achieve the goal. That should be affordable, cheaper, and that's one view. But at the same time, if you do climate change, considering climate change constraints, renewable energy should be the priority. And renewable energy today, the cost has been declining very fast. But considering the system cost in many countries, the renewable energy cost is still higher than conventional energy. So people may ask how to reconcile these two goals. For ADB, the answer is that we should consider new technologies in renewable energy and that to meet both challenges, to provide clean energy to people, at the same time contribute to climate mitigation. As a technical advisor for energy sector at ADB, my role is to review all energy sector launch projects. And when I review these proposals from colleagues, I make sure that the innovations, new technologies that can meet the energy access goal and climate mitigation goal should be considered, and the cost should be affordable, unless there are such features incorporated in the project design. As technical advisor, I have actually right to turn down the project proposal before that reach further to management and the board of directors. So I make sure that the ADB project should consider renewable energy and new technologies as a priority to meet the goals of energy access and climate financing. ADB has committed $6 billion climate financing by 2020, of which half, $3 billion, should be coming from energy sector in the form of clean energy investments. So in total, ADB committed $6 billion for climate financing, of which half would come from energy sector. Now, that's $3 billion. But people would know also that ADB's lending in energy sector per se is not $3 billion, it's close to $6 billion. So what do we do with other $3 billion? $3 billion in clean energy, that's here, that's also. And how about the other $3 billion? The other $3 billion would come mostly in the form of financing transmission distribution system. We believe a stronger transmission and so that more renewable energy can be absorbed. So that's why we have $6 billion lending in the energy sector, and roughly we have half, or a little bit less than half, in transmission distribution system. in using the smart grid technologies and mini grid technologies to make sure that renewable energy can be used as a priority to the maximum. Now let me touch upon the energy policy of ADB as far as coal-fired power plant is concerned. According to our policy, ADB will only support coal very selectively when other options are not available to meet the basic needs of people. And if we do so, we make sure that high efficient and low emission technologies are deployed. So these are the policy statements. In practice, ADB has not financed a single coal-fired power plant. Since last time, like 4 years ago, we approved a project in Pakistan, supercritical power plant. We have not financed since then, and our staff have been really advised that when we consider any project in any country, we should look at the all options available. Renewable energy being always the first option to consider before we come back eventually, if in this very rare and selective case, to deploy some conventional power. So that's the coal-fired plan on the coal. We welcome and appreciate views from all stakeholders. This will help us to better design our project. The policymakers in developing countries need also to understand the options available and the long-term impact of any investment decision. ADB will continue to provide assistance to our member countries in this process. So for us, the real issue is whether the governments in Asia understand fully and have assessed all options that optimal and low-carbon energy mix in the next 5, 10, 20 years is in their benefit, and ADB want to support them in their low-carbon development. And finally, let me say that policy will and technology progress, new business models, and perhaps most importantly, eventually, market forces will make coal unviable in any case, so that we are hopeful and will all focus on renewable energy development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yongping Zai. Mr. Yongping Zai talked about the energy challenges that Asia and the Asian Development Bank is facing right now. He also talked about the portfolio in the energy sector and also some inputs on the coal funding of ADB. Now we go to the second speaker. The second speaker is going to talk about how ADB's continued promotion and utilization of coal energy is in conflict with the decarbonization efforts. He is the Secretary General of Sanlakas in the Philippines and is head of the Energy Working Group of the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. He has been 15 years in his activism, in his advocacy, and he's a representative of the community in Cebu, which is affected by the ADB projects.
Yes, good morning. Magandang umaga po. My presentation is decarbonization and ADB, looking at, as mentioned by the previous speaker, the current energy policy of the Asian Development Bank, how this conflicts and in fact frustrates the overall decarbonization effort, looking at its investment in Cebu and how it is fared in terms of the standards compliance with the bank's standards. Let me start by looking at what are the premises laid down in the 2009 energy policy of the bank. It projects primary energy demand to grow from 3,227 billion tons of oil equivalent in 2006 to 6,325 MTOE in 2030 for less than 3 decades, and that is for the whole of Asia. And this is partly or largely due to the increase in population, increased economic activities, higher living standards, and greater household consumption. But at the same time, the energy policy, and ironically, of the bank recognizes the increasing vulnerability of Asian countries, where land regions are projected to experience an annual mean warming of 3 degrees Celsius in the decade of 2050 and up to 5 degrees Celsius in the decade of 2080 due to increased greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, it recognizes the need to address climate change impacts. Asian Development Bank's own study revealed that 50% is expected to decline in rice yield potential by 2100, and a loss of 6.7% of combined gross domestic product of countries like mine, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And it also says that access to energy is crucial in reducing poverty. And yet, its own policy is premised on pushing for green energy, which means available greener technologies for coal, such as the fluidized bed combustion technology, supercritical and ultra-supercritical boilers, and flue gas desulfurization. These are a mouthful of technical words. And then provide selective support for coal-based power projects if greener technologies are adopted and adequate mitigation is incorporated, and support such baseload plans if found to be justified after due diligence. Not only coal, ADB in its own energy policy will support and heralds its support to natural gas power plants, oil-based plants for island and remote communities. But in our experience, even using the circulating fluidized bed combustion technology as adopted and embodied in April's energy policy, the same has proven to be detrimental to the community. This is the coal plant, a 200 megawatt coal plant funded by ADB in Cebu, at the center of the Philippines, and uses the clean coal technology as called by ADB. And yet the same technology would produce 4 times more combustion base compared to the traditional coal plants. And of recent vintage, just a couple of years back, communities living nearby, this has already been raised before the compliance review panel, their complaint has been lodged, and the bank, through its board, recognized the eligibility of the complaint and in fact adopted the recommendations. Communities continue to suffer to exposure to coal dust and other related and allied operations of the coal plant. So this is ADB's definition of green energy. And because of the continued investment by banks such as ADB, Southeast Asian countries are expected to increase their greenhouse gas emissions as dependence on fossil fuels increase. That is from 1.2 gigatons of carbon dioxide in 2013 to almost 2.4 gigatons in 2040, equivalent to the current carbon dioxide emissions of Japan. This is according to the International Energy Agency. So that our global campaign to decarbonize is undermined and frustrated by the banks, unfortunately, even as it uses its so-called energy policy. Because ADB continues to promote coal, and even in its context premise of being able to provide power for the more than 1.2 billion back according to IPA who do not have access to energy. We continue to ask power for whom? Because if you look at Southeast Asia, for example, 134 million Southeast Asians do not have access to the energy and the electricity that they need. And yet you have to 2015. And ADB, as a allied issue to power for whom, supports the privatization of power industries, all the more making access a great challenge, a burden to communities and sectors who are unable to pay expensive rates of power. And ADB's own energy policy into needed investment contravenes the aspirational target of achieving 1.5 degrees, not more than 2 degrees Celsius increase in global average temperature, as embodied in the Paris Agreement and mentioned by our representative. Thus, renewable energy, although it is mentioned in the energy policy of the bank, remains a hollow commitment, with finance still being made available to coal and other dirty and harmful energy That's why organizations such as NGO Forum, my organization, Sanacas, the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice continue to challenge ADB's portfolio and continued reliance on coal despite its so-called commitment. Otherwise, this will all boil down to propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Pedrosa. Attorney Pedrosa already started giving us a glimpse of what is really happening on the ground. The third panelist is also going to present some real projects being funded by the ADB. Mr. Yuki Tanabe has been working with JAXES to monitor environmental and social impacts of projects by international financial institutions.
So my name is Yuki Tanabe. I work for Japan Center for Sustainable Development Study. I'm going to make a presentation about the ADB policies and practice on coal power plants. And first of all, why we are focusing on coal issue? Because the coal is the largest source of the CO2 emission and the highest emission performance, CO2 emission performance than other sources. And the electricity, in the electricity there's a potential of alternatives, bigger potential than the transportation and other industry process. And as international energy agency said, we don't have any room for new coal power plant when we reach the climate goals adopted by Paris Agreement. However, as in my understanding, the ADB doesn't have any concrete policy on coal power plant. When we compare to other international institutions, and after the President Obama called international financial institutions to adopt restrictions to coal power plant in 2013, World Bank and the EBRD and the EIB and other OECD export credit agencies and Chinese also committed to something about the something regulation on coal power sectors. However, ADB doesn't have any such regulation at the moment. In my understanding, this is due to the strong intervention by Chinese government. Was pushed by the Japanese industry. So as Mr. Dai said, ADB has not approved coal power plant since 2003, 2013, because there was a big fight in the board of directors meeting about the junction coal power plant. And at that time, US and European countries fought against the project due to the climate impact. And other European countries also abstained this project. However, including Japanese agreement and other countries fought, this project was approved. But since then, ADB has not approved project on such a big coal power project. However, ADB is still considering coal power plant in Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar. The name is CHP5, Combined Heat and Power Plant. This is the system of the both heating and power, creating a heating and power together in the plant. However, there are many problems in this project. One of the biggest problem is the air pollution. Ulaanbaatar is one of the dirtiest air pollution city in the world, and the project site itself already exceeded such air pollution emissions. And also, some people have already resettled. This is still considered by the ADB, but the resettlement action plan has not been made. But people have already resettled this place. But the ADB didn't monitor this happening. So, yeah, this is one problem. And the Mongolian government has a target as an INDC on renewable energy, and they will increase the renewable energy to 20% by 2020 and 30% by 2030. This project is the opposite of this, inconsistent with this goal. And in addition, the CHP, the technology of CHP is very the efficiency is so low, and if OECD, if we compare the OECD standard, and the OECD export agency cannot approve such low efficient power plant anymore. And the ADB, we asked the ADB to disclose the draft EIA, but the ADB disclosed the one draft EIA, but has not disclosed the updated EIA anymore. And Mongolia is a very cold country. They need heating, and coal is the only available sources to make a heat at the moment. However, they have a huge potential for renewable energy for creating electricity. So the ADB should support such renewable energy in Mongolia. ADB is now preparing strategy 2030, and as Mr. Tsai said, the Paris Agreement should be reflected into this strategy. So, if so, the ADB cannot approve the coal power plant anymore. So, I believe the ADB should follow the Paris Agreement.
Shinki, for your presentation. So now we have two presentations regarding what's happening on the ground in the communities, especially those affected by the projects. Now, since we also want to present solutions from the panel, we have two presentations. The following two presentations are going to be presentations regarding solutions which we can have for us to decarbonize Asia and decarbonization. The third presenter is Mr. Ratan Bandari. He's the coordinator of JAL Sarokar Manch Inabar. He's also from the affected community of the West Seti Dam, which is a 750 megawatt dam project in West Nepal. JAL, his organization, is working on water, energy, and dams, and monitoring IFI operations in Nepal. He is also a part of the NGO Forum with the ADB, and he's been working on IFI monitoring since 2000.
I'm Ratan Bandari. I'm from Nepal. And here I'm going to talk about the hydropower project. This contribute the greenhouse gas emissions. So my presentations is 20 kilowatts. So large hydropower projects are often propagated as a clean and green source of electricity by international financial institutions like ADB and World Bank. However, it's not true in reality. But in fact, the World Bank and ADB, they have been supporting big hydro around the world, across the world. And there are some scientific studies already carried out, how the big hydro and how the reservoir project are creating the climate change, are contributing in the climate change, and so I am going to talk about this, and yeah. So, but scientific studies indicate that the dam and reservoir are probably significant source of the greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, and particular methane emissions. And this calculation implies that dam methane emissions are responsible for at least 4% of total warming impact of human activities. It also implies that dams are the largest single anthropogenic source of methane, being responsible for nearly a quarter of all methane emissions due to human activities. So dam diverse water of river, which creates significant additional climate impact because they drain and dry up downstream wetlands that are carbon sink, holding vast amount of the greenhouse gas in the soil. But ADB and World Bank, they have been investing huge amount of money in this project, and these projects are displacing communities and contributing deforestation and damaging environment and ecosystem. So, but dams are greatly benefiting from the instrument meant to address climate change, including carbon credit under the Clean Development Mechanism from the World Bank Climate Investment Fund. So these large hydropower project and dam project are not always an effective tool to expand electricity or energy access for poor and affected communities. So why ADB and World Bank and IFs like EIB are funding in such kind of project, but not supporting and not funding for the community-based micro hydro and off-grid project like solar and wind. So here I would like to recommend some alternatives like wind and solar. ADB must not fund for big hydro which contribute to climate change, global warming and displacing people and damaging the environment and displacing the community. But why not ADB is supporting the wind and the solar and off-grid project? So ADB must not fund for such a big hydro project and must support such an alternative and clean energy like wind and solar. So go for this alternative is the best idea. I'll say. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that very powerful but quick presentation. Now we also go into another presentation which illustrates that we should have genuine alternatives and genuine solutions which does not affect communities. The fifth presenter is Mirna Dominguez. She's an activist from the Philippines, and she has been an activist since 1983. She's the Policy Advocacy Officer of the Asia Pacific Network on Food Sovereignty, and they are working in more than 10 countries in Asia and with more than 35 organizations. They're working on food sovereignty and climate issues. In the Philippines, in EPFNS, they started engagement in terms of monitoring the ADB in 2001, when the ADB granted a loan to the Philippine government on the Green Sector Development Program, which aims to liberalize the Philippine rice industry.
Good afternoon. Magandang hapon. Naipag naman ang amin ako. I am Mirna Dominguez with the Asia Pacific Network on Food Sovereignty. It's very nice to hear ADB telling us that they are supporting clean energy. But maybe it's different on the ground. We are not a scientific organization or a network. We just listen from the people because we always believe that those who are working on the land working on the forest, working on the water, are the best people who can tell us how do we balance the ecosystem. So our study focuses on dams. How do dams impact on food sovereignty issues and on climate justice? Maybe from the point of view of ADB, hydropower energy are clean energy. But from consultation with the people, the impact of the dams on the lives of the people is very, very great. That we cannot say that it's a development project. So when you say Asian Development Forum, Asian Development Bank, your first question is development for whom? Because on the ground, you cannot see the development. We believe that when you say development, the marginalized communities, the marginalized people will benefit from the community, from the development project. But on the other hand, it's not what's happening in these places. So whenever there are dam projects, they have these three purposes: hydropower, water supply, and irrigation. Our study focuses on the Laipan Dam of the Philippines and the Songbong 4 hydropower project in Vietnam. Actually, these are two contrasting projects. One is an unsuccessful project, which is the Laipan Dam. Its construction was stopped, and then we have the relatively successful project in Vietnam, the Songbong 4 hydropower project. But both projects, unsuccessful and successful, have similar impacts on communities. So just to shorten my presentation, I will just present our conclusions of our study. So if you can see, our studies say that the dams do not serve the host communities. Actually, host communities suffer the consequences of having the dams. Those who are benefiting from the dams are the cities, metropolitan communities, where the corporate businesses, big businesses are established or are operating. Secondly, dams unfairly displace or worse, uproot tribal, indigenous communities. Thirdly, dams greatly disrupt the ecosystem, putting communities to greater danger. In fact, the same study of ADB also pointed out the negative impact of the dam in Vietnam. Fourthly, dams destroy not only the natural environment, but also the good traditional values of communities. The answer of ADB to the question of displacement is resettlement. But I only have this analogy. If you put out a fish from the water and put that in an aquarium, you don't call that resettlement. Because the natural habitat can never be replaced. You cannot displace one community to another community and tell them this natural habitat is the same thing as your natural habitat from where you've gone, from where we uprooted you. And that's the main question. And fourthly, dams worsen the gap between the rich and the poor, the rural and urban communities, and the lowland and upland communities. So, while the urban communities are benefiting from the so-called benefits of the dam projects or hydroelectric projects, the rural communities are there, suffering from abject poverty, without livelihood, without land to till, without certain livelihood. So that's one question. And then the lowland and upland communities. One study that we had in Laiban Dam, that dam is not a very big dam. It's just a small dam, but it was able to uproot the endangered tribal community you call the Remontados in Quezon Province. Now, where are those Remontados? They were thrown away. They were driven away in the upper section of the mountain again. But they are there. And when we studied that case, we realized that these dam projects are violating laws that should be protecting indigenous communities. So generally, whether the dam, when do we say that dams are successful or unsuccessful in terms of impact the community, we have to go back to the community and then maybe we would rethink another way to create alternative energy, clean energy, which Ratana said, maybe it's better for them to develop the solar energy and the wind energy. problem to the climate change. That's all.
Thank you very much. I thought that you're going to take more time, but thank you very much for keeping to the 7 minutes. So thank you for that presentation, Mirna and Natan. They both presented compelling evidence that clean energy should also include an analysis, an honest reflection and analysis on how projects affect communities. Now the last panelist is the last presenter, is Mr. Hemanta Vithanage from Sri Lanka. He's from CEJ, an environmental organization based in Sri Lanka, working on environmental laws and science. Hemanta is also the international convener of the NGO Forum on ADB and the Friends of the Earth International Vice President. He is the executive director of CEJ, and he started his advocacy on monitoring the IFIs way back in 1992. Hemanta.
Thank you, Molly. There's no debate about energy security issue. We all have access to the clean energy sources. But the clean energy not necessarily need to come from big power plants. So sometimes when you get the clean energy into the cities, so you forget already that somebody is already suffering from those pollutions. So this is where we have to think about energy sovereignty. Some of our countries don't have coal. For example, Sri Lanka don't have the coal. But at the same time, so we are pushing for coal power plant. I think this is something for all of us to understand where this clean energy need to come from. Now we have an issue. We have been generating energy from nuclear, coal, gas, and other renewable sources, but at the same time now we are suffering from climate change. Now this is the map of all the cyclones, you say typhoons in this part, since 1980 to 2005. So now this is already making problems for our people, and those people who are suffering from these ones are asking, to resolve that issue. So this is one of the old coal power plant in Thailand. It's called NGO Coal Power Plant. By the time we presented this 300 death certificates from the Memo community to the ADB president in 2007 in Kyoto, it's already so many people are dying. And these are the respiratory problems around the people who are suffering from respiratory problems in Memo coal power plant. Tata Mundra, so people, fishermen lost the access, and it's a big power plant, and there are many other environmental issues, but at the same time, IFC and the Asian Development Bank, everybody say this is the best energy, clean energy. But how long we can live with this sort of energy? So basically we have 4.4 billion people in Asia, and we have also more than 30,000 small islands. Philippines already has 7,100 islands, Indonesia more than 17,000, and all the Pacific countries, Maldives, and there are many small islands. They are sinking just because of the sea level rise, which is the climate change is the main cause. ADB, this is not new to the Asian Development Bank. So they have already identified that unsustainable development is a problem which is creating all these big issues, like including climate change. So the energy policy says that many ecosystems are vulnerable to climate change, and some of will probably be irreversibly damaged. So it is not new, this language to the Asian Development Bank. And also we already know the poor are the ones suffering from this kind of climate change. So this already mentioned about Pakistan, India, Naga coal power plant, so I'm not going to touch on this issue. But at the same time, Asian Development Bank have already identified by 2010 to 2035, we need to reach 16,169 terawatt hours, or half of the world's global energy consumption by 2035. So which means if we are going to make it from the coal power plant or any other fossil fuel, including the liquid natural gas, the global carbon emission 35% higher than the current emissions, which is not going to be sustainable for the world. Now, if you look at the carbon budget, if you want to keep it below 1.5 centigrade, which we all demanding under climate justice, so we have very limited carbon budget, which is like 630 gigatons. So we are, the way the Japan is developing coal power plant and many other, China, India is developing coal power plant. Asia is reaching this carbon budget very, very soon. And according to IEA report, the China and India will emit about 108 gigatons by 2050. And this is going to be taken from this carbon budget. So what is the remaining carbon budget for smaller countries like Sri Lanka, or maybe Philippines, or maybe Maldives, or maybe any Pacific island? It will be very, very minimal for us. So this is an issue that all of us should understand, that if we continue to burn fossil fuel for making energy, so we are not going to resolve the climate problems, and we are not going to respect to the Paris Declaration. We are not going to keep the temperature below 1.5. So we have a problem. So that is the problem. Now we have to answer. It's not about just energy security issue, but energy security in a climate crisis era. So Japan has already reached their carbon budget. So it's a negative carbon budget already. But at the same time, Japan is building more and more coal power plant after Fukushima. So these are some of the concerns. At the same time, the Asian Development Bank own document has identified 42 million people are displaced in Asia and the Pacific during 2010 to 2011, and more than twice the population of Sri Lanka. So I'm from Sri Lanka. So this number and this quotation is very much close to me, because we have 21 million people, and it's the double the size of Sri Lanka. People have been displaced. So this is a serious issue for all of us. But still, we don't have a definition about the climate refugees or climate-induced migrants, whatever you say, but they are suffering. And this report already has identified that some may have resettled in those places, but some may have migrated to other places across the borders. Then you become a climate refugee or a climate-induced migrants. So this is going to be one of the serious issues for Asia in the coming years. Unless we resolve the energy issue, we are going to create more and more climate refugees or climate-induced migrants. At the same time, it is going to be a problem for many of the countries, including most developed countries. So therefore, we have an urgency to resolve this issue. Now, as the Friends of the Earth, we have developed some publication, and hope Noli has a copy of that. This publication, I hope some of you can have a copy of that. But in this one, so we are demanding few things. One, to stop any new coal by the Asian Development Bank. And we also want to prioritize the development and establishment of sustainable energy, including community energy and power plants. But in Sri Lanka, we have a rooftop solar, so which is one of the best system. You don't have to give money to the big corporations to make energy, because energy generation has already become a small packages. You can do it already. Why you want to have the several kilometer long transmission lines to give energy to the rural area? So these are some of those bad practices which is done by. But at the same time, if you want to have a renewable energy, you have to have a smart grid system. I think that is somewhere the Asian Development Bank can still engage under the new energy policy. And also we want to have the use the Asian Development Bank name to lobby for renewable resources. You can get enough funding to make that smart grids and supporting the renewable energy. And also, we also think that Memo coal power plant is still there, and there are a number of other coal power plants, including Naga coal power plant. People are suffering on the ground, so people need a remedy. So I think the Asian Development Bank has a responsibility to resolve those problems, although they may be sometime about 2 or 3 decades old story. Now, when you want to have the energy, the Asian Development Bank policy already understand and that they will support energy where those where there is no other sources. I can understand in certain countries, but why the Pakistan? Pakistan has the sun all over. So when you have that sun on the sky, why you want to burn coal? I think there are many of the countries in Asia Pacific region has the sun. So that is where you can invest. I think that's the way if you want to decarbonize, I think definitely we have to decarbonize because we are thinking about otherwise in the next decade we will see a lot of climate refugees are coming, and then that's going to be a bigger issue that you are not going to resolve at all. That's going to create increased conflicts, and that's going to create more and more fights between the communities and between the countries. So this is the way you have to resolve that issue, and I think unless we look at this kind of sources, we will not be able to resolve this issue, and we will not be able to decarbonize Asia. But decarbonizing Asia is a prime important at this moment. Thinking about the carbon budget, countries like Japan has to go carbon neutral by 2025, and all our countries need to go carbon neutral by 2050. Otherwise, we will not keep our promises to the Paris Declaration. This is very clear. So this is our last message. So it's time for the Asian Development Bank to give up its addiction to coal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hemantha. Hemantha has presented new points like the climate refugees and the climate post-migration. And he also had a specific recommendation in terms of investing in sustainable and community-based solutions. So now we have 20 minutes. Thank you very much for all the presenters. We have 20 minutes for plenary discussion. So please raise your hands or go to the mic, introduce yourselves, and make the intervention very concise, please. Please proceed to the mic. Who wants to go first? Sir, you were raising your hand. Sir? Okay.
I am Luz, and I'm from NGO Forum on ADB. Having heard the extremes of the panel that we have from the ADB to Mr. Hemantha, the point there is how do we transition? I think what is important is to come up with a transition plan. And my question to Mr. Sai, is there any transition plan that ADB is planning to put in place to enable to decarbonize Asia? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 2 more questions before the panelists answer.
Thank you. I am Hassan Mehdi from Bangladesh. Before going for future decarbonizing, I want to ask ADB to compensate the communities for its historical emissions. In Bangladesh, since 1972, ADB invested $3.2 billion on dirty energy, that's called diesel and petroleum, and only 432 million for the clean energy, that's called small off-grid. That is 96.7% of its total energy sector fund went to dirty energy, and only 3 point some percent went to the clean energy. Again, now at this moment, ADB has 3 big projects in Bangladesh on power plant, and which is all of them are petroleum based. None of them are on clean energy. The situation in the coastal zone, there are some other relationships. ADB built some grid lines in the name of connectivity between the countries in South Asia, and those are supporting investment from other countries like India to Bangladesh and to take electricity to their countries, and they build huge, big number of coal power plants in our areas. So I'm talking about the supporting, ADB is supporting, making supporting environment for coal power plants also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have one more question before we ask yes? Then we can go to another round after.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric. I'm representative from ISA Mongolia Youth Organization. So throughout this forum, we actually mentioned a lot like what ADB can actually do in order to reduce the climate change. But on behalf of youth organization, is there any suggestion that the role or any responsibility that youth can play in this part in order to push this climate change into another level? Thank you.
So we'll ask the panelists to answer first, then we go back for another round. So there are 3 sets of questions. The two questions the panelists can respond in general, but there are also specific questions to the ADB. The general questions are, how do we transition? The second general question is, what are your suggestions for the youth sector on how they can be more involved in the climate change advocacy? And more specifically for the ADBs on the transition plans, and also the Bangladesh-related projects which are still causing the communities, the situation in the community, and the compensation. So maybe we can ask.
Sure. Let me also take this chance to address also some of the points raised by our fellow panelists also. Let me start with the transition plan. Whether ADB has a transition plan from, say, high carbon to a low carbon portfolio. The answer is very clear. That if you look at the ADB's energy portfolio, that a few years ago, we can take example of Bangladesh, for example. We've been financing natural gas project pipelines, power plants in Bangladesh for a long time. And that was considered relatively cleaner fuel compared to coal. We actually did not finance coal in Bangladesh, even when we were requested. So that then this year's in Bangladesh, was in Bangladesh months ago. I visited several institutions. We encouraged them to do solar projects. We decided to finance utility scale solar project in Bangladesh, and also supporting EPCO for their mini grid project, agricultural houses using solar. So that's one example, but overall, same pattern has happened in energy sector for ADB's portfolio. Now, ADB is lending every year $5 to $6 billion. Half is in clean energy, the other half in transmission distribution, but this part of transmission distribution, we have made it smarter so that they can help renewable energy penetration. So in practice, you will see already the transition in progress. And this will continue, we can assure you. And in the framework of a discussion of the 2030 strategy, and also the current discussion on the climate change framework, we will put these points as the views expressed here as contribution to that debate. And you will see that in ADB's 2030 strategy and the climate change framework will confirm what we're already doing in practice in energy sector. So that's about transition plan. Very specifically on the participation of the youth in this process, I'm very happy that to report that the ADB has been encouraging the youth to join this process. Next month, ADB will have its Asian Clean Energy Forum in Manila. We have decided to have a special session with the youth, and we will invite the young graduate, but also the entrepreneurs, young entrepreneur startup companies to come to Manila to show their innovation in clean energy. Back to the comments I have heard earlier from the fellow panelists. First, I take note of all your concerns, your suggestions, very constructive, that will help ADB in our process of moving forward. Just a clarification on, let's say, CHP 5 in Mongolia, for example. We have really examined all possible options. In there, if eventually ADB decides to go forward, that is not on the decision point yet. I have, as technical advisor, I have requested the team to consider renewable energy option in Mongolia before that this whole plan is going to be submitted. And this, you will see a parallel development of renewable energy in Mongolia. And also we have also supported interconnection project between Mongolia, China, and perhaps Northeast, other countries in Northeast Asia, that the large-scale renewable energy project in Mongolia can be used not only in Mongolia, because a lot of renewable energy project issues demand is low. If you have a larger demand in the neighboring states, that would make the whole project more viable. I also want to mention that in terms of hydropower, it's part of the energy mix. We believe hydropower, whether it's big or small, is low carbon by definition. But I fully agree that safeguard issue is number one to be considered before even we talk about low carbon, because the whole purpose of having large scale and small scale hydropower is to serve the people. But if people are suffering from this, we should not do it. In case of Nepal, the Tanabu project, I know I was the director for that project. We were very, very careful in trying to see how the safeguard part can be really is the most important factor to be considered. We did the same thing in Sri Lanka, either for a wind power project. We have spent 2 years in doing this bird migration survey before we decided to move forward for wind power project. The point is, whatever form of energy, whether it's hydro, wind, even solar, there are safeguard issues we have to take care of. And this should be part of the decision process. With that, I would like, maybe we can go for a second round of questions.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to ask the other panelists to respond to the other questions, including suggestions on transition and the youth involvement.
I think the energy transformation is a very important subject right now. But we have to realize that some of the societies are over-consuming energy. So unless we realize that when you are over-consuming society, and the people in Mongolia or people in poorer countries are the ones going to be suffered because in two ways, because they don't have the access to energy, at the same time they are the ones suffering from climate disasters. So as a whole world, we have to understand this realization. So then only we can have the solution. So energy transformation is a very important area, but I still believe that we don't have to bring all the energy by damming big rivers and burning fossil fuels. So there are many other models you can use. Where is the tidal? Who is using the tidal at the moment? And the whole ocean is an energy source. We are not using. We are not using the sun. We are not using the wind. I mean, in some countries, 100%. Some of the European countries have gone 100% renewables. Why not other countries can do the same thing? What are the cost problems right now? If you can buy a very, very cheap solar power plant in India, but when it comes to Sri Lanka, it's about 3-4 times higher. So you have to deal with those tariff issues also. And there are many other areas that you can think. I think as the youth, the realization of this issue, that this unequal world at the moment, this present generation is consuming the natural resources, opportunities, environmental space, everything because of the overconsumption is this current generation. So I think it is your right, because it's you and next generation, your children, are going to be affected much more than what people suffering today. So I think we all have to think about that we have only one planet. So in this one planet, everybody should share. And this morning session shared some of the 8 billionaires in the world is using 3.9 billion people's resources in the same. You know, this is the wealth, how this is well generated. So unless we resolve those issues, there's no safe place for us. Some of the countries at the moment, US government, President Trump, is denying climate change. So how can you live in such a world? The science has already proved that climate change is already happening, and the small islands are sinking, but at the same time, this president is one of the most powerful country in the world, is denying there's no climate change. And behind him, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, also coming and accepting this thing. How can you accept this kind of ruthless, not supportive with the science, that sort of things, it's not possible anymore. But this is politics. I think we have to get rid of those politics, otherwise we are not going to live in this world, especially for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mirna is also going to respond and regarding the energy transformation, I think the first thing that ADB should review is its framework of privatization. Because even if we are saying that we are for clean energy, but our framework for transforming energy is within the framework of privatization, surely you will miss the big points of food sovereignty, climate justice, protecting the rights of the people, the indigenous communities. So I think what I am suggesting to ADB is that kindly review your framework of privatization. For the question of the youth, I'm so glad to hear that there is a youth here today asking for the role of the youth. Because actually, the social movement, what we are always looking at are the youth. Look at most of the forums or movements now, you can see people as young as us. Well, I was a youth before, and until now I am young at heart. My first suggestion for youth today is that please organize your movement. Movement to monitor the world. What are these IFIs doing to our world, to our resources, and be vigilant to go against anything that you think are disregarding the rights of the people. Secondly, for the youth, I also second his suggestion that please moderate your greed of the natural resources. Just consume what you think is moderate for you, enough for you to consume. Do not consume so much. Get out from the framework of the neoliberal market, wherein everything you want to see, you want to buy anything. Just buy what you need. Okay, and then third, I think you have to be connected with other social movements for you to be able to see the whole picture, because the whole picture will give you the correct analysis of what we are here today. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, on the point of energy transformation, the same as the youth, it's more political than scientific or legal, because most of the programs, policies, even projects of banks, not only ADB, seem to gloss over the science. Climate change, the realities are vulnerability, etc. So much so that if they cannot do it, you have to understand this is still a bank after all. And the primordial consideration is not looking after the welfare of communities, but how to rake in more profit, for it to encourage investment and ensure that business stays afloat. Whereas our consideration is how do we protect communities? How do we ensure that our livelihoods, our homes, and everything else are not impaired by increasing vulnerability to the impacts of a environmentally hazardous project funded by these IFIs, or slow onset impacts or extreme weather events brought about by climate change. It's more political. And if you look at the policies of ADB, it's far from what our colleague here is saying, even the energy policy of ADB. It still promotes coal and dependence from coal. Unless that is removed from the energy policy, we will, energy transformation is far from being realized. So, political action. And the same goes for the youth. While Myrna mentioned some that can already be done, I would also like to encourage you to engage your own political processes, even at the local of your community. Because you might not know, in the next couple of years, a whole plan could be proposed there. What we did was engage our own localities by coming up with resolutions saying we want clean, renewable, sustainable energy, a resolution against coal plants. So that by the time there is a coal plant project in the offing, you have an existing resolution against the establishment of a coal plant. Also to help communities affected by these coal plants. You see, their preoccupation is already how to make ends meet. That engaging giants such as ADB or IFIs or private corporations investing in dirty and harmful energy, who are there to help them? Shouldn't it we or shouldn't it be the youth? I'm also a member of the youth, not young and I've been able to represent communities in their struggles, in their fight against these kinds of projects, to help them articulate their points from their point of view, not to substitute your standpoint for theirs. At the same time, to understand that there are many options in engaging whoever proposes a project like that. Also, I would like to reiterate the point mentioned, organization. It is important to organize at the level, not only at the community, but even national level, to engage your national government. Also to link this to broader movements. There has to be international solidarity to pressure banks who have no immunity to communities, to movements, to the sites where these projects are being set up. So that pressure will ultimately make them rethink, if not make our leaders rethink in dealing with IFIs such as ADB.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there more responses from the panel? If not, I can get some more questions. Yes, please introduce yourselves. Just go to the mic.
Hello, my name is Carmen. I am from Malaysia. I'm doing sustainable city planning in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm representing ASEAN Youth Leaders Association, ALA. My question, actually my first comment is it's very interesting that ADB is on one side, or the banks on one side, and NGOs are on the other side. So it's like two extremes, and it was a really interesting kind of discussion. So question for the bank, or for anyone who is interested in this, is that how do such large organizations respond to bottom-up pressure from civil organizations, from the people themselves? Because I have to see that there's always a huge gap in this. So how do you address this? How do you hold each other accountable? Do we have more platforms like this? And the next one is regarding Friends of the Earth. Wonderful name, by the way. I hope everyone can really be true friends of the Earth. So it's regarding climate refugees, and I think personally it's a really sad thing that climate refugees are still not protected by international law. So as NGOs, governmental bodies, and even the United Nations, how do we work together to ensure that, well, climate refugees can be recognized, because this is not a future issue, it's a current issue, and how can we all together in multi-sectoral collaborations, perhaps, how can we move towards solving this issue for our generation and the generations to come? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one more, yes.
Thank you. I'm Marian de los Angeles, environmental economist. I'd like to bring attention to the group here that ADB has recently released its 2017 Professional Press New Guidelines for Economic Analysis of Projects. And what is new here is that it includes environmental evaluation, environmental effects, externalities, and social costs. So this is something that we should all look forward to be applied for forthcoming projects. Having said that, I have two suggestions. One is for ADB to look beyond project evaluation and do programmatic evaluation to respond to the need for looking at, really in a more integrated way, sources of energy vis-a-vis country assistance. And then for the NGOs, I'd like to alert to you that you have environmental economists in your countries and regions whom you can tap and collaborate with to operationalize these methodologies. And you could actually do a retrospective analysis too of those problematic projects and perhaps find solutions to compensate and etc. For specific issues. You have for Japan a big environmental economics group. For South Asia, you have SANDI, South Asian Network of Development and Environmental Economists, and for East Asia, you have IPSI, Economy Environment Program for Southeast Asia Network. So they are there at your disposal. Hopefully, you can collaborate with them in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Roy from the Philippines, and I'm a climate communicator. So there are conclusions presented by NGOs and environmental groups that ADB investments are actually pro-coal, like the big hydro and clean coal, which is not really clean coal after all. So my question is there actually a solid or binding agreement in line that actually tells clearly and specifically ADB to stop from these investments, or these suggestions presented by these groups are mere recommendatory?
Okay, thank you very much. We'll take those three questions first. So probably I'll ask Mr. Zai to respond first to the questions on the binding agreement, on the analysis, and looking at programmatic evaluation.
Let me start with the last point, whether these recommendations we hear today. I assure you this will be the input as usual to our internal discussions looking forward to what would be the ADB's position at different points. Currently, at this point, the prevailing policy of ADB is consistent with that of World Bank, OECD, and other NDBs, that we do not right now rule out financing coal, because there are some exceptional cases people would like to use to meet their basic needs, like heating in some places. You don't have other solution, then we don't want to leave that option out for our developing member countries. In that context, I would also mention that ADB is very close to the ground. I mentioned myself, I spent 24 years in Africa and Asia. Every month I go to developing countries and villages. I was recently in Nepal, Bangladesh, China, some villages like ADB financed mini-grid project with solar and with wind. I know that with that kind of project, how people's life have changed. So I do not consider ADB as a giant institution that is too much above people. I think we are very close to people. And sometimes I half joking, I say that you have a World Bank, but ADB is World Local Bank. So, yeah, because we are very close to people, and we know what are the issues. Mini-grid has been mentioned. We are promoting mini-grid in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Philippines. We have actual project. We can bring the youth, we can bring NGOs to visit our project and see how people react to ADB's financing in those kind of projects. In our project evaluation, economic analysis, it's true that we have just received this latest update on the economic analysis. I started as an economist in the bank, and 20 years ago, some of the climate change consideration was not even there. Now today, we should start considering even I said, I trust eventually the market. If the carbon has a price, and in such a way that coal has no space in the market forces will drive the coal out of the consideration, out of the equation. We are looking forward to that. And I think ADB is contributing to that. In our evaluation of project, if we put a price in carbon in our different scenarios, sensitivity analysis, we can very clearly see advantage of renewable energy. I trust that more than a statement from whatever level. I think that is happening. From my side, I think that's I can come back to a specific point.
Yeah, there is also a question on the making stakeholders accountable and if there are more platforms such as this.
We every year, I mentioned that every year in June, I organize Asia Clean Energy Forum. I also welcome NGOs to attend. As well, in the Philippines, actually we interacted every year with NGO colleagues, and we also invite and sponsor the youth and to attend the forum. That's one way. But also we have our missions going to the field. Myself, I go every month to a developing member countries. Next week, in 2 weeks' time, I go to Pakistan actually to consider whether, in some part of Pakistan, what are the solutions above the conventional power? Wind, solar, and what kind of solar? Decentralized solar or utility scale solar? So we are in the process of discussing that, for example, in Pakistan. We take your suggestion very much in heart.
Thank you very much. Now for Friends of the Earth, about the climate refugees and how they can collaborate with the network.
Yeah, I think two questions. So one, you identified that ADB is one side, the civil society is another side. Perhaps I want also to ask you where's your heart is going actually, which way you're going. At the same time, I also want to identify that when Mr. Ping mentioned about 6 billion already available for going for renewable sources as well. I think there's a significant amount of money is also now going into some of those solutions we are proposing, but which need to be radically done because otherwise most of the countries just now I got a message that Sri Lankan government is going to sign another agreement to build another coal power plant in Sri Lanka. Why? Everybody understands that by 2025 we have to start decarbonizing and going carbon neutral the whole region. So why you are going for another coal power? Who is supporting these funds? Not necessarily the Asian Development Bank. There are at least 15 Chinese banks, including AIIB, is supporting them. Unless we have a policy on that, it's not necessarily only ADB to stop. Japan government also should stop, and Australia should stop mining coal. Indonesia should stop mining coal. China should stop supporting coal power plant. I think it's a big thing for all of us. So it's just ADB is just a small partner of this whole story. So that's one of the things. I think maybe if we can build a policy on this issue, agreed understanding about what we need to do as a region, I think the ADB has much more potential to bring all these stakeholders together and come up with the Asian vision on decarbonizing Asia. I think that is something which we can propose at this moment. It's not just looking at individual power plants here and there. You may want to have a coal power plant in Mongolia because maybe there are no other sources. But ADB also has a mind to mouth actually. If you have a coal power there, and then you can support the coal power plant there. So I think maybe that is something, but I cannot understand why some countries like Sri Lanka is importing coal from Indonesia, Russia, China, and this is not necessary. So I think we have to, as a world, as a region, we have to agree. I think on the climate refugee issue, so we are seriously talking. Even yesterday we had a discussion about how can we deal with this issue. I completely understand There's no definition. Nobody wants to put the refugee term as under the climate change, because the refugee has a different definition related to the civil wars, etc. So what is our definition? I think we all need to work together. I think we really welcome you coming on board with us to this kind of discussions. I think we all should agree, which is going to be the biggest issue in the world coming future. So unless we tackle that issue, we are not going to resolve that issue. At least you have to have a legal definition. So I think we all get together in doing something, pushing world policies, laws, and accepting these terms in the UN system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Are there any more questions from the, yes, Mr. Hassan.
Hello, my name is Ryan Hassan. I'm the Executive Director of NGO Forum on ADB, and most of my friends are up there. I didn't choose to speak, but on that note of the Asia Clean Energy Forum, we've been engaging in it for the past, 6-7 years now. Officially, there is no session with civil society on the record. So maybe at the eve of this 50th anniversary, you might want to take a note that there needs to be a conversation about energy with the civil society in the Clean Energy Forum.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time. We just have a minute. I will not try to attempt to summarize or wrap it up, but I'm going to wrap it up now. So we talked about the vulnerabilities in Asia, the challenges in Asia, the impacts of dirty energy to communities, and the need for genuine alternatives or solutions which are community-based and pro-environment. We've also talked about how the ADB in its 50th anniversary, moving forward in the strategy 2030, can really decarbonize Asia and ensure that not just in projects but also in policies, it is true to its vision. And I think the most interesting bit in this conversation is the fact that we all agree that we are in this together. It's not just one or two institutions or one or two individuals, but we should all do our part in ensuring that Asia is decarbonized and made climate resilient. Thank you very much for your participation and for staying here for 1.5 hours. Thank you very much to our panelists.